I did a video that I encourage you guys to go look at talking about the sanctimonious nurse. My perception overall, how I look at nurses has changed after this year. It simply has. I had a generally positive look on that industry and not as much anymore considering how things have rather transpired over the course of the year. But let me explain just really briefly before I show you yet another example of this. It's changed because there are so many of them using their position of authority because they are actually what you would deem as front lines when it comes to this whole COVID thing. And they've used that position to be dishonest, to fear monger, and their words, but nurses, doctors, of course, is taken into consideration, and a lot of that has led to policies that have led to the destruction of people's livelihoods and their businesses and what have you that are not getting on the other side of this. Now, remember, for those of you that have shorter memories, the whole point of flatten the curve, that when we started this whole deal, when the lockdowns and all of the restrictions that were happening all across the country and in other countries, the reason why we were doing that was to make it easier for that industry. Now, of course, the idea is that the kickback is that you need to get serviced. You don't want it to be a situation to where they are overwhelmed and then you cannot get serviced. That was why we did it, to protect that industry. So everybody had to put their lives on pause. Of course, the can got kicked continuously down the road, but it was all to protect that industry and by this sort of domino effect, protect us, but mostly surface level to protect that industry. Everybody had to put their lives on halt if you were deemed as non-essential. But my biggest issue is an example that we're going to show, and I'm going to break that down. Why I don't care that she's frontline, I don't care that she's a nurse. What she's doing is dishonest. Mathematically and logically, it makes no sense. But it's another example of them, and that's my biggest issue. Never mind the TikTok dancing, cheering on protesters, as they had already lectured us that we shouldn't be doing those things. Like, never mind that. My biggest gripe is them using their position of authority to be dishonest. Let's look at this really quick. This is looks to
with
be
long-term effects.
another
And then I said,
TikTok or something like that. But let's look at it. Yes, it is another TikTok.
so I've seen a lot of comments about the mortality rate for COVID-19. More specifically, people like to focus on the survival rate. Let me ask you a question. Let's just say I gave you a ton of Skittles. Like a lot. We're talking millions of Skittles. And then I told you that 17,391,270 Skittles could make you sick and leave you with long-term effects. And then I said there's only 312,636 Skittles in there that will kill you. Would you still eat any of the Skittles? Would you give the Skittles to your kids? Would you give the Skittles to your loved ones?
Before we continue, I'm gonna say my biggest. There's some other deals that she says toward the end that I took issue with. First and foremost, the survivability rate is being mentioned, rightfully so, because we're talking about risk. Now, never mind that what she's saying doesn't make any sense. I know that, but let's go through that first. We're talking about risk. So whether you talk about the restrictions, whether you talk about the businesses, thousands of businesses that are not getting on the other side of this, the increase because you've changed people's lives and attempted suicide, abuse, child abuse, domestic abuse, and these sorts of things that have been on the uptick because of the impact more mentally, which you would consider definitely in a lot of cases that this is a medical issue, right? So she's starting off mentioning the survival rate and that we mention it, and then she's trying to use math to basically the Skittles analogy is representing the cases, long-term effects, all of these sorts of things. The reason number one why that doesn't even make sense and why she's saying this, because she's treating us, and this is how the government has been doing it as well, as if from what we know from COVID, it's just a randomized thing in terms of who it impacts, who will it make sick, who will it generally hospitalize, and of course, who will ultimately die. It is not random. For the most part, we've seen that people that are older and have these other sorts of issues, that's when the survival rate generally goes down. But even with them, it's high, the survivability rate, but it goes down. But when we talk about risk, she acts as if there's risk in nothing else it is that we do. Right. So basically, you wouldn't want to take any risk. You wouldn't want to, let's say, go on with your lives or anything like that. Because if you get in a car, do you not understand that you may get in a wreck and you may die? That is a thing that can happen. You can slip in the shower and bump your head. You could walk down the stairs and sprain your ankle. You can do all sorts of different things. Prior to COVID, you could spread, diseases and illnesses, be it a cold or influenza, viral pneumonia. These are things that can be passed along, but prior to COVID, right? But for whatever reason, we didn't worry about that. That if the wrong person gets it, they will end up getting maybe sick, and they may even have long-term effects. There's long-term effects in a lot of different things. You can get a cold and have long-term effects. You can get influenza again and have a long-term effects. And I'd imagine as someone that has went to school for a lot of this, she would know this. I'm not saying anything that isn't proven factually or anything. I'd imagine that she knows that. But that's the thing about the dishonesty when it comes to the survivability rate, when they try to form the argument against it, is that they act as if COVID is the only thing that exists and there's no risk in anything else. The food that you consume comes with these elements of risk and heart diseases, which kill millions of people throughout the year. All of those are things that are risk, right, that we take as individuals. And that's why we mention the survivability rate, because it doesn't seem like an equal trade-off. It doesn't seem like it's anything close to an equal trade-off when you consider the thousands upon thousands of people that have had their livelihood ruined, not because of the virus, but because of the fact that you have locked them down, man. You've shut them down, you've restricted them. That's why. So the analogy itself is operating as if there is a chance that you may die, or there is a chance that you may have, well, more so she's speaking to the death, but she also mentions these long-term effects as if that doesn't exist in anything else. But also, again, most importantly, she's acting as if we're all the same when we're not. COVID, in terms of how it impacts you, is very discriminate. Believe it or not. Will there be people that may have no issues, that may struggle with this? Yes, again, that can be said for other illnesses as well, but we can't sit up here and ignore the trends. For the most part, it's older people that are making up, that have a higher chance of either dying or being severely ill and needing to be hospitalized. And there's a lot of people that are going around that are going to be completely what you deem as asymptomatic and never have any issues with this. And for the most part, they are in other age groups. They are in other health demographics that the experts themselves have already identified. We have been knowing this information even back in April and March, even coming from other countries that had dealt with the pandemic earlier on. We knew this, and then our numbers just confirmed it. Your own experts, your epidemiologists who do the when the antibody test started rolling out and we were seeing what the infected fatality rate was. Like, this is what y'all, as the numbers and indicate. But why are you mathematically talking as if this is a random thing and we're all the same? And that was always the problem with the lockdowns and the restrictions, because what it did was it treated us all as if we are sick and we all were the same, knowing damn well that the virus did not impact us all the same. Numbers I was going over back in April, and I do all those videos talking about New York and their numbers, and the percentage, the people that, when you look at those infected fatality rates, or rather when you talk about confirmed cases and confirmed deaths, more so, not necessarily the infected fatality rate, but even by the confirmed deaths and the confirmed cases, you see that there was older people in my demographic, like from age 0 to 29, right? It was almost statistically insignificant. When you talk about hospitalization and even more so with death, of course. And that's also another thing when we talk about cases and how they deem things as cases. So why doesn't it make sense again mathematically? Because again, when you look at the fact that you know that a lot of people are going to get this, never need to be tested, never going to be required to be tested because it's a virus that a lot of people get, most people get, and will never need to go to the hospital. But let's continue on just really quick before I dive into what else that she said that was incredibly stupid.
Would you tell me that you're still going to eat the Skittles because you have a 99?
So we've already went through that. It's a terrible analogy that she's talking about this Skittle stuff. But even then, when we talk about what's in a Skittle, yeah, there's possibly, all the sugar and all of that the wrong person could eat that. I don't think the percentage rate of people that eat Skittles, like don't maybe have a reaction or something like that. I mean, you got to account, nothing's 100%. So you got to account for it. Like most people that eat Skittles are not going to just die from eating a Skittle, but there may be someone that does. They may choke on the Skittle. That is a thing that can happen, right? That can be, that you have to account for. So again, mathematically speaking, this is a terrible, logically speaking, this is a terrible argument that she is making.
9.9% chance of surviving that, even though you know that over 17 million of those Skittles will make you sick.
That's not even what we're dealing with here, man.
You need to think about what you say before you say it. It's offensive to talk about the survival rate and disregard all of the people that have died from COVID-19.
That's
Those
what
people would
pisses
still
me
be
off.
here if COVID-19 didn't exist. Do better.
Like that's what pisses me off about it, because it's like, who the hell are you to sit up here and act like, well, it's disrespectful when we mention the survivability rate? You see in the text, he's talking about not downplaying the virus, as if mentioning what is actually their own experts have provided us with that. Well, it doesn't matter who it is, people doing their own testing studies. Doesn't matter if it's the CDC, they're essentially saying the similar thing about the high survivability rate here. And to sit up here and act like it's disrespectful just because people die is, again, she's trying to tug on the heartstrings. But most importantly, this is why she's in her scrubs and she's doing all this, because she wants to present herself as an authority figure, as if to say, how dare you say this? And then she's basically telling you to shut up. Just shut up. Why? Don't say that. Just shut up. Because God forbid, everybody else who has their own lives that have been impacted, virtually everybody has been impacted in some way, shape, or form from this. Nobody's downplaying anybody's death. We know people are dying, but that's not a new thing. And that only sounds harsh because we have to bring it up because you're acting stupid. People died prior to COVID-19 from a multitude of different things. Yet we did not do this. We're doing all of this for something with a survivability rate that is that high. Yes, if those people didn't contract it, maybe they don't die. Maybe they die from something else. When you consider, where we're at now with the flu deaths and those virtually being non-existent, they may die from something else. They may have died from something else after the fact, not shortly, after the fact. People die. That isn't even saying anything. People die. Would they still be here? Maybe. For how long? I don't know. Those are all the risks that people are trying to take into consideration, which is why it's not, you don't run away from the fact that it's a 99% survivability rate. You acknowledge it. Is it worth putting millions of people out of work? Is it worth the raise and the other issues that I mentioned earlier? Is it worth people's businesses being shut down and not getting out on the other side of it? Is all of that worth it? But to just say people die is lousy. It's a non-argument that you do not apply to anything else when it comes to any other virus that exists, including ones without vaccine. Like I said, there is no cure for viral pneumonia not associated with influenza. Yet you could pass that before COVID and you could kill someone. That could apply to so many different things. Someone gets an infection, some sort of infection from a bacterial infection, a viral infection, or what have you, from something that they got from someone else that happened before COVID, and it's going to happen long after it. And that's my issue with these people, is that they use their position of authority to basically say, shut up, listen to us, don't question anything it is that we do, and you fearmonger. That to me, definitely considering what this has resulted in, that to me makes you a big asshole, man. Because you're not even being informative. What you're doing is using terrible arguments that a lot, like again, you didn't, you're a nurse, so maybe math or logic or whatever ain't even that's not even in your area of expertise. And I'm not saying that to try to diminish what it is that a nurse does. Or they went to school and to do all of that, and I'm sure they know a lot that I do not know. But risk, that's not unique to your position. Elements of risk, assessing risk, that's not unique to your industry. This is something that we all do, and we've done it over the course of human history and recent modern history especially. And that's why the survivability rate is being mentioned, because we're not getting a equal trade-off here. It's not even close. It doesn't even make sense, and it doesn't seem like it's worth it when you consider what we know about this virus. We're not all the same, and this is why my argument had been this long before, December. We're going 8, 9, 10 months, however long it is that we're going. I had said that you actually you probably would have even saved more lives, if that's something that you care about, if you were not treating everybody as if they were impacted by this virus the same way. But for whatever reason, including a lot of nurses, I don't know if they love the attention that is given them or something like that, but including a lot of nurses maybe basking in this. But they're making terrible, terrible arguments that have resulted, again, in the utter destruction of people's lives. Because be it politicians, a lot of them work, doctors, they have their own set of public officials, people that claim to be experts. But going back, you probably would have saved more people's lives if you treated people like what the data was saying, not as if we're all equal. There were age groups, more specifically. And you look in the upper East Coast where you're talking about, like, in some cases over 50% of their deaths are coming from people in nursing homes. Why are you worried about that 29-year-old man who is as healthy as probably he's ever going to be in his life, yet you're treating us all like we're the same? This is why it's weird. We look at it, and this is something that we've never ever done in recent modern human history, and it still doesn't make sense. But if you focused on protecting the more vulnerable, right, be it in isolation or whatever it is, not worrying about us, you could have dedicated far more resources to them, because we don't all, it's discriminate, right? It's discriminate. It's not indiscriminate. Again, can anybody get it? Yes, but it's not indiscriminate in the fact that, the evidence shows us, y'all's own data shows us that there's a certain type of person who is most likely to have an issue. And then there's a lot of folks in these other age groups, a lot of big part of the working population, which are never going to ever even know they ever had it. And they probably wouldn't unless they got an antibody test, or maybe they have some sort of natural immunity. I don't know. But to act as if we're all the same was always a mistake. That's what her analogy basically rests upon, this sort of idea. But again, I am so tired of these sanctimonious nurses who use their positions to get on social media, either sit here and have, trying to pull on hearts and tug on heartstrings, and sitting here selling sob stories just because they are front lines, and they signed up for a job that required them to do this anyway. That was kind of what you did anyway. Um, and then to lecture everybody else because they are, yes, I'm sure they're going through a certain, it's a time that may be difficult for a lot of them. It may be, and I don't want to diminish that. But at the end of the day, the virus does have a 99% survival rate. It comes with its sense of risk if we do get on with our lives in some capacity. But that could be said long before COVID, and it will be said long after COVID. So please stop using your position. You presenting yourself as an authority figure because you're front lines and you see COVID patients and stuff, to then not only just fearmonger, but really to flat out lie with numbers. Again, to me, that makes you a bigger asshole. Enjoy the rest of your day.